Greetings! It is I, Tantus Naravan Dracovin, Lord Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It's time to continue our discussion on D20 Modern, the modern take on the 3rd edition of Dungeons & Dragons. When we last left off, we've been talking about game mastering in D20 Modern. So let's move on to some exciting techniques, because, it's more than an interesting plot and a grand finish that's going to fill your players with memory of this adventure. Those alone won't. There's a lot of things that are going to happen behind the scenes in your adventures that players won't get to interact with. So I'm going to talk about a number of exciting techniques you can use that your players will see, will be able to interact with, which are going to fill them with excitement. Now, the first thing you're going to have to realize, and this is a very important one, is that both GMs and players can fall into this habit that you're going to be a series of combat scenes, of battles, with talking points in between. Yes. You see, we're ignoring one of the most key elements here. The combat's all well and good, but those talking scenes. When you are role-playing, that is the point where that is the point where you get to play the role. This is the point where your DM has to have the characters in the world be there to interact with your players. The players by themselves, interacting with each other, aren't going to develop playing the role. You require yourself as the game master to actually do it also, with all the various characters that you're establishing with your world. GM characters, everything else that your players are going to be interacting with their own heroes, should be vibrant. They should have outlooks. They should have their own goals. They should have their own traits that you're going to build to make them feel like real characters, so that you have these interactions between your game master characters and your players' heroes that are going to make these memorable moments. They should be able to interact as if they were actual people. This is going to allow these talking points to feel real. That's what you want them. You want them to feel like actual conversations with actual people, and not just cardboard cutouts that you're just throwing in the place to fill some space. You want it to make it feel like it's as important, and it's something that's going on just as much as those battle scenes. It's going to add a level of interest. Now, it is also important to note that you, as the game master, are going to determine these characters' initial outlook on your players, how they initially react to them. Players can use diplomacy to influence them. That's very true, and change their attitude into one that's more favorable. Because most of the time, most GM characters are going to start with, of course, an indifferent outlook at the players. At worst, unfriendly. And the fact is, the conditions of which are setting up the encounter with these characters is also going to determine the outlook. If you've been doing stuff in town that really would piss people off, then yeah, when you meet that guy, he's probably going to be unfriendly, if not angry with you. You see how actions reflect this. And the fact is, though, you don't always need a role to influence that attitude. A good amount of role-playing and some actions in-game can shift that attitude better than you would have with just a simple roll of the die. In fact, the roll of the die could make that attitude worse. It could be a hindrance to them. And you only normally get one attempt to influence that NPC with your role. So the fact is, my good role-playing, playing my role as a player, might be enough to change that NPC's attitude without having to roll a single die. It might be. Now, the fact is also, you have to remember, those GM characters, they can use diplomacy in amongst each other. They can influence each other with diplomatic words. Players, heroes, can't influence other heroes. It'll be up to the players to determine how attitudes between characters are developed by acting in amongst them and developing that. But the various relationships you've begun to develop with the characters, with the players, are encouraging this, because they are interacting with these characters. You're encouraging them to interact with each other. Now, fights with thugs, they're all well and good, but they can get boring, samey, they're just there. You need a great adversary to oppose your hero. Whether these are a specialized group of minions, or some kind of foil to your heroes, or even an arch villain. Is completely up to you how you're going to use it. But having an adversary is going to help drive your characters and make things more interesting. And this adversary, well, we're going to detail friends and foes in a little later chapter, so some episodes down the line. But you're going to use that section to basically build the opposition to your players. Now, if this is some kind of villain, you don't want it to be too powerful regardless. You don't want to be so powerful it can just flick your heroes away. The fact is, coming up with an intelligent character that has a lot of great plans, that enacts these plans efficiently and usefully, can make it appear as if this villain is more powerful than they seem. It seems like they're like always a step ahead of the heroes or something like that, and maybe it was just part of their plan all along, and the heroes just happen to be sort of following along. Coincidences can occur like that. On the other hand, having a hero that has effectively a glass jaw, one punch and they're down, it's not fun. You don't want to have that climatic battle with this final villain be poof and they're down. You want them to be able to oppose your heroes, whether it's directly in combat or something else. They have to stand up to your heroes. At least seem like they could. At very least seem like they could. Dice rolls can, of course, make things turn any way. But the threat of it should exist. Again, whether it's something like a foil or a villain. Now, oftentimes you'll see action movies have exciting and interesting locations where their fighting scenes are going to take place. You can do the same for your adventures. Granted, you can't go sometimes quite as crazy as action movies go, but you can add things into the fight scenario that will increase the interest in it and make it seem like a very interesting fight. So it's like individual fights can become more interesting. You could have ledges or cliffs or pits where someone could possibly fall down into and either take damage or die. You know, the trying to balance, trying to push people over, could be interesting. Fog all around you, everybody has trouble seeing and grants concealment to everyone, so you have to, sort of judge where everyone is and maybe not quite hit them because of the fog. It could be you're in a factory and the machinery is moving and you're trying to dodge out of the way of the machinery while fighting each other. It could be an area where you have pipes and stuff with steam occasionally bursting out where you have to avoid the steam. You could be wading through a marsh, which will slow you down, and should you drop an item, it just sinks into it, never to be seen from again. So you have to worry about holding on to whatever you're fighting, that if you should drop something, it's gone forever, oh no! You could fight on ice, where you have to worry about, keeping your balance on the slippery ice, which could make you slip and fall. All these scenarios, all these settings, grant much more excitement to your encounters, and oftentimes will sort of add to the excitement basically because it's going to affect both sides of this encounter. Not just the heroes, it'll affect both of them. So that's it for today, though. I introduced you to, of course, some exciting things you can do. Well, techniques you can use to add excitement to your adventures. From the GM characters, which I've told you as a GM, make them living. Make them just as much detailed as a player in a way. On the actual character side, develop their character and have them interact with your players, and you will have much more exciting places in between battles. I talked about having an interesting villain, some kind of foil to your players, that whatever this adversary is, it will be of an appropriate difficulty, not too easy, not too hard, and it will be interesting enough to draw them away from just those normal thug fights. And of course, I talked about having interesting locations for your fights. Just not generic back alley street. Have something going on there that adds a level of danger and difficulty that both sides might have to avoid in order to be successful. All these techniques, and the rest of them that I will review in the upcoming week, are going to add interesting levels to your games. So that's where we're going to go on next week, is more of these techniques and moving on to some tips and tricks you can use as a DM, which might help you out. But if you have any questions, comments, anything you would say, anything you think I left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. It shows support for the channel, the Empire, the work I do. If you want to show some extra support, you can always check out my Patreon, recently updated, in the description below. But regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.